Duncan, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Nice to see you.
So, for those who don't know, Duncan McGregor, like many of the best people, trained as a physicist, but he discovered very early on that he has a talent for and a love of writing software. So, he's been a professional developer for 35 years, writing code and running projects for large UK clients, including the UK Ministry of Defence and Siemens, Sony, LVMH, NatWest, and most recently, the Met Office. And that's why I wanted to speak to him about how to work with your developers and how to tell when your software team are lying to you. So, Duncan, welcome.
Lovely to be here, Mike.
So, Duncan, let's just start off by kind of understanding the development team, because you've been part of a development team all your working life, and I haven't, like many project managers, simply had to manage them. So what's important to a development team? What do they care about?
Well, I mean, we are individuals after all, but assuming we're talking about engineers, I mean, we have the sort of Maslow hierarchy of needs. So we do want to be paid, but after that, I think there are probably two things we really care about normally, which are delivery. We do care about sort of writing software that makes a difference in the world. Nothing worse than spending time not delivering. And the other is technology. So, I mean, it's easy to imagine that like we care about technology for its own sake. Personally, it's not technology for its own sake, but it's a thing that I'm good at doing. And so it's the thing that brings me pleasure. And so I am motivated by doing the thing I do well, doing it well, being allowed to do it, being allowed to learn about it, that sort of thing. I think it's sort of self-actualization, if you like, in technology.
Excellent. So how does that play out in terms of how the development team will interact with the managers that they're working with, the project manager, perhaps other kind of line managers within the organization? I mean, what's special about caring about the technology?
I mean, I suppose it may be that we need to be fed that ability to do something in a project. So we may bore easily. So I guess, largely speaking, we are paid quite a bit of money. Other people will also pay us quite a bit of money. So we may well choose our clients based on which ones allow us to use the technology we're interested in using, learn technologies we're interested in learning, and so on. Maybe even just the ability to write a line on our CV that went, I did this in this project. Yeah. That can be really important to software developers because it's the thing that gets them their next job or whatever.
Yeah. Part of why I wanted to speak with you is because we know that there is sometimes tensions between project managers on the one hand and developers on the other, because they want different things. The project manager just wants to get something done with a high level of confidence, to a budget, to a deadline. And what you and I have agreed is that there are some times when project managers kind of feel that they maybe development teams misleading them, perhaps even lying to them. What might cause this perception, or what actually might cause a developer to mislead or lie to a project manager?
Well, so I mean, I think we probably have to distinguish between misleading and lying, right?
Okay.
So if we're asking the question, like, is a developer deliberately lying to me? Why might a developer deliberately lie to me?
Yeah.
I think there are both legitimate and illegitimate reasons for that. So I think one reason might be sort of the usual project management schedule chicken. It doesn't suit me to tell you that my bit of this thing is running late because I know that somebody else's bit is running later, and I can be cool with that.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's a normal sort of wanting to please. If you put me in a corner and say this will be done by such and such, I might say yeah. I think there are some other sort of legitimate, deliberate, lie is a strong word, withholdings of the truth, maybe. So we might pad our estimates in order to maintain quality of the code that we work in, for example. good example. Sometimes I think, things are for your own good. There are things that you don't need to know, or you don't need to know yet. So we're professionals. It's to some extent like dealing with doctors, I suppose. You may not be able to cope. You can't handle the truth.
Yep.
Sometimes that's just about simplification or whatever. I mean, I think I have managed to run projects where we would do planning sessions for work that, in fact, the project team had already done.
Mm.
And so effectively we were lying about whether or not the work had to be done in order to have a good relationship. Fundamentally, we knew the next thing was coming along. So we were, in fact, slightly ahead of the game. Everyone was happy. Some project managers might have wanted to know that. Who knows? So I think that's a sort of deliberate side of, I guess we'd call those misleading.
Yeah.
And then there are the lies that are things that turn out not to be true.
Yeah.
And so the inadvertent things, and sometimes they turn out, sometimes they're things that we're predicting and we're simply predicting wrong. Mm. And sometimes they're things that we believe to be true but simply aren't. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of those things are probably over the things that, the uncertainties in life. So things like the schedule. Mm. So we might, we're often over optimistic in the schedule, but we're telling the truth to ourselves. We think it's going to take this amount of time to do this work. Yeah. That optimism is sort of generally seems a good thing, but may or may not be, depending on how well this project goes. So I think there's a whole series of sort of inadvertent lack of truths that aren't misleading, but might be lying, depending on your definition.
Yeah. So if that does happen, how can you tell? I mean, obviously you can't tell if someone is just genuinely not aware of all the facts and is telling you what they believe to be true. But if you are being misled deliberately for whatever reason, whether it's cultivated optimism or we want an easy life, you don't want a conflict, you just want to please someone, or even if you are trying to just give yourself a little extra wiggle room to make sure that you can deliver to the schedule, how can a project manager tell that something's going on and there's a tough conversation that could be had?
I mean, and obviously I'm tempted to say, you can tell that your developers are lying to you because their lips are moving, but that's not always true.
Your lips are moving now.
Like I say, it's not always true. So, I mean, again, like developers are humans, and some of them are good at lying, and some of them aren't. Mm. I sat in a sort of planning meeting with a developer who swore blind that a particular feature was going to be developed, going to be delivered in the time frame of the end of this month. Went to lunch with him. I said, Robert, like, there is simply no way this is going to be delivered on time, is there? And he said, no. I was like, what? I said, what's your confidence level? I'll bet you, I'll give you 5 to 1 on a day's pay that you won't deliver this on time. And he wouldn't take that bet. Then he said, no, I'm not going to take that bet. But you were simply lying in that meeting. Why would you simply lie in that meeting? But he was very good at it.
Yeah.
And it suited him. I don't know whether he was playing schedule chicken or what, but it suited him to be lying at that point.
Yeah.
But engineers are generally not good at lying. If you want to know if they are good, then I think maybe, obviously, like the better relationship you have with somebody, the more likely you are to know when they're telling the truth, and B, have them tell the truth to you more.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could look at patterns, for example. So effectively, I guess we always lie in estimates to some extent. There is sort of systematic bias there, but we can take the systematic bias out by sort of calibration and so on. So that's a way to say, we know this isn't true, but we can calibrate it out again.
Yeah.
Another technique I've sort of seen talked about, which is effectively which is breakdown. Effectively, that if you push people so hard that they break down, then at the point they break down, they're not lying to you anymore. Like it is such a failure to not be able to cope, and so that does seem to be a management technique that I've seen happen, which is push people so hard you can tell that they're not lying to you, because they couldn't be lying at that point, right? You don't,
Yeah.
you can't
I
tell
think
whether
we
they're
need, I
telling the
think
truth
we
or
need
not.
to say that in a modern workplace, as a management technique, pushing people to the point of breakdown, not to be advised, and can get you into some serious hot water.
You see, you say breakdown, we might say burnout, we might say a bunch of other things, but software projects are often critical to an organization.
Yeah.
And it's not nice, but also like developers want to please, and we want to get things down, and that may, I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
Especially sort of in the ends of projects, the sort of death march stage where we're all just trying to deliver.
Yeah. So a lot of project managers nowadays, in their eagerness to get kind of predictability, are seizing on the idea of velocity and kind of measuring, sprint on sprint, what can be achieved in terms of story points or whatever unit of measurement. In your experience, is that a sensible way to go? Can that produce realistic, useful data?
So there's a sort of movement in software around no estimates.
Yes.
That basically says that software is such a high uncertainty environment that we shouldn't even try. But what we can say is divide our work up into small enough increments that you can measure the throughput of them. And that if instead of estimating something, we say, well, we won't take on more than what we consider to be a week's work for this week, then that is effectively an estimate.
It is an estimate.
It is an estimate. But we're kind of less held to it, right?
Yeah.
It's a sort of implicit thing rather than explicit thing. Personally, I come from a sort of background of what was originally extreme programming, which was one of the very original sort of agile methods, I guess we call them. And that had the idea that you would estimate, roughly speaking, sort of like in the order of a day or two.
Yeah.
And that would be calibrated over time.
Yeah.
So that you would sort of take your best guess based on this project and so on, about how long a thing would take. And then as you discovered that, what you estimate takes 3 days will take 6 weeks, then you would scale accordingly.
Yeah.
As I say, it's kind of got a bit of a bad rap. Certainly, I think that the sort of the large scale planning things like Gantt charts and PERT charts, there's sort of so little certainty about what we're doing. Certainly, the beginning of a project, that those are not normally useful. And also, I think there's this really nasty thing that we might projects start in this sort of high uncertainty mode, and you might say, well, like the job of a project is to get to a certainty mode.
Yes.
But technology sort of seems to be designed, because technology moves on, then technology seems to keep it in this high uncertainty place. Unfortunately, that is the reality of the sort of high tech world we live in.
Yeah.
Personally, I suppose that estimates, if I can give estimates, I should be giving estimates, because I know that estimates are valuable to my customer.
Yeah.
I will push back on giving estimates that I'm being held to, but some sort of idea of this is deliverable in this time, either in the large or the small, I think is sort of, personally for me, part of my responsibility to the people who are paying me money.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point there. There is a quid pro quo around estimates, and for every developer that might push back on giving any estimates, there's a project manager who will treat an estimate as a solid commitment. And as usual, common sense lies in the middle ground. If you're going to push hard for estimates, you've got to respect that an estimate is nothing more than a professional judgment about what is most likely to happen if our assumptions are sound, and nothing more.
So I think I would like to see sort of estimates negotiated in a team.
Yeah.
So a thing that is not the actual values of them, but whether or not we're using them effectively and how we're using them is a matter of negotiation, right? Yeah. Some people really hate them, and in the same way as they might, hate the nickname you give them or something like that. And that's something you've got to respect, because people are human. But I think it is acceptable for the management of organization to point out that estimates are a desirable characteristic from their perspective.
Yeah.
And like how could we make estimates, the estimate process, acceptable to you as a developer, right?
Yeah.
I think one thing that sort of worked well for me is the point at which the probability of delivering this feature rises from zero.
Yes.
So you say, there is, in my professional judgment, no way that I could do this in less than a week.
Yeah.
But it might be delivered like at some time after a week. There's a possibility. And that is a way of saying, we don't actually expect it to be delivered in a week.
Yeah.
But that's a way that you can think about relative difficulties of things without being held to the actual outcome.
Yeah. And I think that kind of leads in the direction, and we don't want to kind of focus this whole thing on estimates, but it does lead in the direction of recognizing that an estimate is only really useful if you are prepared to take some measure of confidence alongside it. But the other thing that strikes me, that your idea of negotiating whether we have estimates, of course, there are two broad circumstances. Either your developers work within the organization, in which case they have to, I guess, respect the organizational standards and procedures, or they're contractors, as you are, in which case, if you're absolutely adamant you must have estimates, then you must only secure contractors who are prepared to give estimates. And if they're not, I guess you just say, well, okay, you're probably not the right cultural fit for our organization, even if you're a damn good developer.
I mean, I think organizations are not homogenous in the same way as developers are not homogenous, right?
Yeah.
So even within an organization, one team might be estimating, another team might not be estimating. Yeah. One team might start estimating and stop doing it. Another team might estimate and not be and start doing it.
Yeah.
And those should be, I think, negotiated between the sort of peccadillos of the management and the preferences of the team.
Yeah. And actually, that's taking us back to a topic that you raised earlier, which I want to explore, which is, you said your developers are less likely to lie to you if you've got a good relationship with them. And I think the most valuable thing we can talk about is advice for project managers. If you are leading a project, and as part of that, managing a development team, what's your advice to a project manager to get the best out of that team and leave them feeling they don't need to lie to you? They can be open and honest about the situation throughout.
Well, I suppose, not specific to developers, but if you don't want somebody to lie to you, then allow them to tell the truth.
Yeah,
that's a sort of. I mean, we learn not to tell the truth, and we learn not to tell the truth sort of over our lifetimes, effectively, which lies are acceptable and which aren't.
Yeah,
but we also learn the truth about a particular relationship, and so sort of starting off on a relationship of, I can handle the truth. I want to know. I want to be brought into the fold of the people that know what's actually going on the project. That's a good start. So accepting the truth, both actively encouraging the truth and also not exhibiting the behaviors that are, negative feedback when people give you the truth, I think.
I think it's worth saying for people who are watching this, the concept there that's really important is the idea of psychological safety. People feel that there's no emotional or organizational penalty for being open and honest. And it's worth looking at the interview I did with Carol Osterwile, because that is part of what she was talking about in a much longer interview. So
you don't know whether this is a longer interview yet.
Yeah. Longer than just psychological safety.
So I would say, so having said that, allowing people to tell the truth, but there is another, coming back to the estimates in a sense, not asking questions that don't have truthful answers.
Yeah,
is another part of it, right? So if you're prepared to accept that you don't need estimates, that's an easy way to cut down the amount of lying or misleading or whatever. Progress is another interesting place, I think, because estimates are one thing, but how well you are doing against those estimates is another.
Yeah.
And that's another easy place to be advertently or inadvertently lied to.
Yeah.
I think there are two parts of that, effectively. The problem with progress is that ultimately it is still kind of based on whatever our estimate was. So it's nobody wants to know, like when you say report progress on this, nobody wants to know I've done 5 days of work. They want to know 5 days of work compared to the 10 that you said it was going to be or whatever. And so, progress is a hard one. I guess we like and our project managers should like verifiable progress. So it is only actually the delivery of a thing that's important. At the point where I deliver a thing and you can see it's in production, then you know I'm not lying to you because there it is, it's in production, right?
Yeah.
So if we can get to delivering very small amounts of things, then maybe I don't have to be reporting to you how much through that thing it is. Because I can be delivering something every 2 days or whatever, and that's fine.
That short milestones means there's less trust gap.
Yes, I mean we call it continuous delivery. And it's about basically lots and lots of little deliveries, and keeping things in production. That's very important to us.
And in terms of the style of management and leadership, you mentioned a couple of specific behaviors around, the kind of questions you ask and the way you receive them. But you said that development teams can care about particular things, about delivery and about the technology. So how do you lead or manage them in a way that allows them to focus on what they care about and feel good about the work they're doing?
I suppose I might differentiate between leadership and management from that perspective. I'm less likely to lie somebody who I consider as leading me than managing me, for example.
Okay, so what are the behaviors that are going to distinguish between those two?
That's a hard one, and again, probably depends on people. But I think we have, as a sort of software development profession, settled on the sort of agile practices as ways of allowing teams to manage their own work within sort of with goals set by people outside the team, or preferably sort of on the edge of the team. And so the agile practices were designed to work basically in these high uncertainty environments. They were designed to constantly feedback and get better over time. But in particular, I think they take advantage of the fact that software is soft. So we had this amazing ability, to rebuild practically all of a software project while it's still running. We don't have foundations, those sort of things you need when you're building bridges, or we don't have machine tools that are made that you can't unmake and that sort of thing. So in exchange for that sort of high uncertainty environment, we are able to continually change the thing that we're delivering quite cheaply. Now, that depends largely on the quality of the code base that we have. So we have this the ideal software project starts in this sort of high uncertainty environment and has no code, and develops a code base that reflects the problem at hand. And the team and the system, the way that we're developing software and the code itself are molded to fit the organization and the people and the problem that organization and people are trying to solve. So all those three things sort of evolve together in the space of a project to get better and more efficient over time. Done well. Done badly, and the reason that lots of software projects fail is that one or all of those things aren't improving over time. And what normally is the problem is that the quality of the code isn't good enough. It is not then soft enough, effectively, it's not malleable enough. So as we learn new things, we can't make the changes we want. And in that case, we don't accelerate over time. So we're left with a thing that we can't change and gets harder and harder and harder to change, as opposed to a thing that better and better reflects the system, the thing that we're trying to deliver. And so for me, at least, I would like a manager, a leader, if you like, to encourage that quality, to encourage that sort of feedback thing, and to recognize that software projects should accelerate rather than decelerate. So in other words, we are prepared to accept relatively slow start, which means effectively not sacrificing quality early on.
Yeah.
And the problem, I think, largely comes that that attempts to sort of push people too hard results in effectively brittle software that then is going to get slower and slower. So we'd like not to lie to you, but we lie to you, in fact, to keep the quality high enough to sustain this project over time.
Yes.
And that, I think, is a thing that isn't really sort of appreciated maybe by lots of people who don't understand software, but do understand managing people.
I think the thing that's really interesting to me about that description you've given is you started off by pointing out that software isn't like, for example, civil engineering, where you can't civil engineering, you can't go back and remake stuff, and therefore the predictive paradigm is going to work in a different way to the way that it could, it fails in software. However, the outcome of your description is very similar in the sense that in the civil engineering thing, if you're building a bridge, you of course are going to prioritize getting the early stages right, because you can't go back and fix the foundation. So to a casual observer, there's no apparent progress for week after week after month as the groundwork is done, the foundations go in and all of that. And yet if you don't prioritize quality, then you're going to end up with a bridge that will fall down. And what you're actually saying is that software is like that. If you don't allow the developers to take the time to get the quality of the early coding right, then you end up with a project that isn't going to accelerate in its velocity, because you've actually created a brittle framework and everything you do is potentially compromising what you built. Have I understood that right?
You have, but I think software is softer than that.
Yeah.
And so the difference is that you don't get a bridge until you're done, right? There's no part of a bridge that's useful to you until the foundations have been poured and the things are up and there's a deck and all that sort of stuff, right? There is no part of that bridge that's useful to you.
Yeah.
We should be delivering something useful to you in the first month, preferably sooner, right?
Yeah.
I would be asking your software team to have something in production, even if it's only the page you can go to that says sign up here, or this is where this will be, and so on, and build on that. Now, so we don't actually need to be pouring concrete and foundations. That's not the way I think about that quality. What we have is a system where it starts very simple and then features get added to it. And those features make it more complicated. In some ways, it feels like a stock control system to me often. You can see my office, it's a complete mess, right?
Yeah.
And if you were running a stock control, a stock room or a hardware store or like this, you might start with no stock at all, and you sort of bring stock in, and all the time, at the point where you've got all you're selling is 3 different sizes of nails, it's easy. You go into the room and you go, here are these nails, and you can make progress in your selling stock to people. More stuff comes in, and you, up to a point, you just having sort of nails in the corners, the fact that the nails and the screws and the bell pushes and so on are just randomly distributed makes no difference to you.
Yeah.
And so you can be running the shop, delivering features, and everything is fine, until you get to the point where actually it turns out that, but now I understand that there's this sort of organization. If I had a shop with the nails on, because now I understand that nails are a thing in my domain. If I had a shelf with the nails on, then every time now, there are 3,000 different things. I'd know which shelf to go to when somebody comes in to ask for a thing.
Yeah.
So we need to be constantly rebuilding our shelves, if you like, rearranging the things to meet how we now understand the demands of the business, effectively. So it's not about putting up loads and loads and loads of shelves in preparation for this big business. It's about saying, at some point, things are slowing down, and they're slowing down because there isn't enough organization, and we need the time to make that organization.
Uh-huh.
And that's difficult because it tends to happen at the point where you actually have a bit of success because you've delivered some stuff.
Yeah.
So we now have a business, right? And the business is like, oh, well, we're delivering things. And so now we've got a particular cadence. Now we're delivering some sort of rate. But then that slowed down a bit because, but every time I go in, I have to, where were the 3-inch nails? They were over there or up there. Or something. Now I need time to go, and as a software team, we need time to go work out what the principles behind this thing actually are. And that's the point, because we are now delivering and we now have a business, and that business is, bringing in money and can see it can bring in more money.
Yeah. That
we are put under more schedule pressure. And that's a really bad time to be under schedule pressure, because that's the point at which, we come in with, I don't know what, lilos or something, and the lilos get put in the doorway and you can't get in and out because of the lilos. Why have we got inflated lilos? I don't know. So, yeah, I don't see it as foundations. I see it as this continual gardening is another sort of way of looking at it. It's like things grow, things don't grow.
Yeah.
And the reason that the magnificent thing about software is that we are able to give you the option of saying, don't tell us everything up front. Like, don't have this project plan for what this system is going to do. Don't tell us how long the bridge is going to be or how many cars the bridge needs to take, or like, you don't have to specify any of that stuff up front.
We'll just extend it as we go.
It is soft, right? Because nobody actually wants to go through that whole process of saying, here in minute detail is everything that's in our plan for the next 2 years. Because if they do that and you discover that nobody wants to buy that, nobody wants to use that website, nobody wants whatever, you have wasted all that upfront time. So this idea that software is soft and we can deliver increments is really important. It's fantastic. But at the same time, if we haven't designed, because we didn't know anything upfront, if we haven't done all this upfront work, we do need the time to smear that out over the project.
Yeah. So I think what you've basically said is that the problems come because actually a lot of project managers, a lot of managers just don't understand how software development works in the way that you described it. It's not something I'd ever thought about or been introduced to before today.
It's an odd world because it doesn't have normal physics.
Yeah.
And so, as I say, it's a world of managing complexity rather than managing volume of things or whatever. So, yes, and in my experience, Agile is a thing that people now sort of can't admit that they don't really understand, because it's a de facto way we do things, but they don't understand that difference between software, why it is we're doing this thing.
Yes.
I take it back to, again, extreme programming and this idea that the phrase was like, I think Kent Beck said, he discovered that people said that 60% or something of software development was maintenance. And that was like terrible. How can it be like all this big proportion is maintenance? And he said, well, how could we get that proportion up? And so the idea is that what you're actually doing is you're building a team that knows how to take a thing that exists and add features to it, rather than a team that knows how to build this big thing, but then not know how to do the next thing, right?
Yeah.
Once you've built a bridge, it's really hard to say, and we'd also like to run our way over it.
Yeah. I think we're getting towards the end. Is there anything that you think is important that I haven't asked you about, or you haven't felt you've had a chance to mention so far? Any other comments?
So I would say that in my sort of personal experience, the engineers are generally, the topic is lying, right? So engineers are quite bad at lying.
Mm-hmm.
And for myself, I'm like sort of on the autistic end of that sort of spectrum. And that sort of, that makes deception quite hard.
Yeah.
But so we also discovered that out and out truth telling doesn't go down well in society either. That's a sort of lesson that you learn quite hard. So I think this idea that projects are a collaborative safe space, like that psychological safety thing, I think will get you a long way with engineers. because we want to tell the truth. We want to be understood, and we largely speaking tell the truth between ourselves, and that's because we understand each other. So yes, that understanding engineers, I think. And also, I think I'd say that writing software is hard work. It's an exhausting thing. I think at some point we'll decide that we mentally damage people that do it. And I'm not going to say that most people can't do it, but I think that for most people, the reward isn't worth the effort.
Yeah.
So when you find people that are prepared to do it, that's quite a major thing, right? So 1 minute, like we feel like gods, we're amazed at what we can accomplish just by tapping away at a keyboard. And then the next minute, we're like, there's something breaks. We haven't anticipated this thing, depended on this thing, depending on this thing. Everything comes tumbling down. And so we have these sort of highs and lows. And it occurred to me sort of thinking about this, that many of the best teams, they feel like little sort of military units.
Yeah.
There's the sort of gallows humor. There's a disrespect for authority that comes from, I suppose, that sort of fatalism. Like there's adrenaline rushes, and there's, what are we going to do? I'm not sure it's healthy. I'm not sure that we necessarily want that to be the way that software is done well, but it certainly is a thing. And if you see it in your projects, maybe don't be worried about it.
Yeah, and I think that feel like God's amazing what we can accomplish. It struck me that apart from my idea originally that to have this interview, every step of creating this video that people are watching, from recording it to, or planning it indeed, to recording it, to editing it, to putting it onto YouTube, to you, the viewer watching this video now, it is mediated through the work of software developers, and every single element of what I've done to prepare this and to make it available is only possible because of software developers like you.
For better or worse.
Oh, indeed. Yes. Duncan, that has been absolutely excellent. Before I thank you properly, though, if people are interested in connecting with you or finding out about what you do, or a little bit about what you do, how can they get in touch? How can they engage with you?
So I have a website, oneeyedmen.com. From the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a YouTube channel that is horrendously geeky and almost certainly of no interest to anyone, except, I guess, if I publish this on it. I am available on LinkedIn, and I tweet, and no doubt they will be in the show notes below.
Indeed, they will be in the description. Duncan, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much for giving us your time.
It has been wonderful. Thank you, Mike.
Please do give us a thumbs up if you like this video. I'll be creating loads more great project management content, so please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of it. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.